So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me here and for this presentation. So I just say a couple disclaimer. Weaving has engaged me, asked me to come for a presentation. So this is just my own analysis, my own opinion. So I work for CIBC. I work as a relationship manager there, but it doesn't represent opinion from CIBC. Quick disclosure. And also because my day-to-day job is involved with lending for commercial and business. So the perspective that I presented here is from a lender's perspective. So if the bank is lending, what do we pay attention to and what do we look at from appraisal? So it may be different from your client's perspective, right? Because I'm not really calculating a total return from a real estate property, a commercial property. So, and before we start the presentation, I want you to imagine a situation, right? Like a client, you have a client, potentially interested buyer. They're meeting with you, and then there's several options on the market. Then they're looking to purchase a commercial real estate. So from that point on, like how do you evaluate these options? And there's multiple options. So which one should you recommend to the client? Or when it comes to make decisions, client cannot make a decision. How do you help them to make a decision? And then often you will be, taking a commercial appraisal in your hand, with that information, like where do you look for any potential red flags and risks? And how would you take that piece of documents and make the recommendation? So I guess that's the purpose of the presentation. So the whole goal is to help you understand commercial properties through the analysis of a commercial property appraisal. So I have a live sample of appraisal, which I modified. I covered client's information, and I shared it with Michelle and team. So later on, if you want to look it up, you can. I took out the client's information that's private, confidential, but I left the most other information there for you to review. So in case you want to see what it looks like in the real life, what information is important, you can take that sample. So I'm going to start. First of all, I just want to do a quick overview of today's presentation and kind of give you a sense of what we're going to talk about. My name is Bo Yang, and I work for CIBC as a commercial banking relationship manager. I look after a group of clients that they're private businesses, and their revenue size range from like $2 million to $200 million. And the lending size they have with the bank is about 1.5 to about 15. And then they all have different type of needs. So what I come into the picture is I assist my client and I provide advice in terms of what credit facility that can support their day-to-day operation and their goal to acquire, let's say, an asset, a capital asset. It could be equipment, it could be properties. And then to do that, what I do is I look at clients' financial statement. I look at clients' day-to-day financial reporting. And when it comes to commercial real estate, they will present me with a copy of the appraisal. That's why I often get in touch with these documents. And then I thought I can share these insights with you guys. Hopefully it'll help you grow your business. So if somebody comes to you, they want to buy a commercial, and if you're licensed to sell commercial real estate, certainly I think the commission's bigger. Hopefully it help you guys to build your book and then, build a business, right? So that's the whole goal. And I'm willing to share my knowledge, but I mean, if I'm not covering anything that you're looking for, just let me know and I can try to help you find that information as well. And in case, let's say you have a client that looks for lending that I'm not able to help with because like all the banks have a different risk appetite, they do different type of deals. If it's something that I'm not able to help you with, I can also try to help you introduce a different industry partner. I mean, recently there's like a huge appetite for multifamily resident. A lot of people are building and a lot of people utilizing CML Select program. That's something that I don't do, but I have names in the industry if you guys need help with, and I can introduce you to the right people. And then, so as per presentation goes, there's a couple sections. I mean, we'll dive right into a commercial appraisal. So I'll talk about the structure of the appraisal, what section does it include? And from there, we'll go into and focus more of our time in property valuation, because I think that's the area that you guys probably be interested in. So when it comes to property valuation, there's several methods. We'll, review each of the methods and then spend time there, and then you can stop me. We can interact on that. I have a sample appraisal, so I'll try to put it up on the screen and then give you some time, and then you can go through that and use that sample. I have some questions on the slide, and you can try to understand, by reading the information. And then finally, I will finish off with a Q&A session, and you guys can ask me questions. And in case there's any, like, if I don't know, just maybe compile with Michelle or send me a list, and I'll try to help and gather what you need to know, or what you're interested in learning. Okay, so by show of a hand, does anybody have ever seen a commercial real estate appraisal or worked with one? Yay.
I have a question. So we're talking about commercial here. There's understanding of commercial. There's a piece of land with a property on top. Which type of commercial you're talking about right now? Is that building a property with the business, or the property is just itself with no current business on it, or it's because there's still different kinds in that word of commercial?
Yeah, so it's for business use, so it's not for personal use. So basically, let's say multifamily would be considered as a commercial if it's more than 4 units. So that's a commercial. They changed to 6. That I'm not, like, I don't do a lot of the multifamilies. These are considered as investment real estate in our space. So the space where I'm at, I service active operating companies. So a company that has, let's say, accounting firm, a law firm, a dental practice. I noticed there's a healthcare clinic across from us here. That one, if that business is buying the building it's in, that will be an area of expertise where I comes in. So a building, so there's a piece of land, there's a building on top of it. So you own that whole building plus the land, and then you operate your business in there. Yeah, right. So there's two. It can be office. Yeah, it can be office. Industrial. You're absolutely right. It can be office space, can be industrial, can be a warehouse, can be a strip mall, can be a retail space, can be, so for any sort of a medical use, a warehouse in the general industrial space. So typically those are the ones that I touch. Yeah, so the example that we have here today is a general industrial space. So clients, they operate in that space, and then they have a warehouse component, have office component and all that stuff, but it's for actual operating business. So there's often situations where you run into a client that want to buy, let's say they want to buy the building across from this building here. So that will be considered investment real estate, because that buyer wants to generate income through collecting rents from each of the tenants. So in that situation is investment. But for what I come in is I support owner occupied. So the medical clinic owns that piece. That's a perfect client. But if the medical clinic, say, takes up to 50% of that building, and there's other units, so that condominium units next to it that's going to be rented, I can also support that as well. Yeah. So, but thank you for that question. That clarifies.
So the owner need to occupy more than 50%.
Yeah. So, and then, so move ahead. So the appraisal is a very comprehensive document. It outlines a lot of things. And then, apparently, obviously it is used to help estimate the market value, right? That's the first thing. So when we open appraisal, it tell you, hey, this building is worth this dollar amount. But there's more to it, because in that appraisal, the appraisal is, sometimes like 90 pages, and it's got humongous amount of information in there, right? So it will help us identify a lot of things that you'll be interested to know. For example, for a buyer, when they look at that building, they're like, hey, this is the feature I want. This is what may work for them. But by reading it, it will figure out, hey, you know what, is it going to meet all my needs? Is it going to help me negotiate the price with the seller? Because the seller will definitely have a different type of opinion when it comes to price. So that will help with the negotiation. And then when the buyer takes the building, and then they say, well, this is the building I want to take, and they need to go to the lender. And then with the appraisal report, the lender will be able to determine the loan to value on this building, right? So it will help with the valuation and help to figure out, because it will show the cash flow this building can generate. It also helps the lender to determine how much loan this property can afford. So there's, overall, it helps all the stakeholders that's involved in this transaction. So, for example, some of the information that's interesting you find that will help all the parties involved. There's past sales purchase history, right? When it comes to that, if the building was frequently transacted, that probably is a red flag. And why is that? If the price inflated, right? That will help the buyer to make decision. And then with historical use, one of the example that I bought today actually shows a blurb in there and talks about the soil conditions. Typically, we explain the historical use, and that's very important because depending on where the building is located and what the historical use of the land was, there could be potentially environmental issues. And then when you buy a building, you want to buy a clean building. You want, don't want no problem with the soil. I ran into a situation where one of my clients, they want to construct their own building. It was a newly developed industrial land, but then historically that land was housing a steel manufacturer, right? Like it was a steel plant. So of course there's going to be contamination on that ground. And then they were doing remediation for years after years. But then later on, they found out like leveling issues, all that stuff. So deal didn't go through, right? So, but it was quite unfortunate just because the client was really interested. With the initial budget, they can afford it. But with the additional things that they discover as they go along the process, they realize this is going to cost them extra $200,000 to make this building happen. That can be a deal breaker, right?
Can we ask question right away, or we need to wait for the last?
No, you can stop me anytime.
I forgot. So what kind of previous history business may contaminate other than laundry and gas station? Yeah,
mostly the situation I come across, like it's really site specific. So the one I came across was like a steel manufacturer, but they were doing remediation for years and years. So in the end, the soil was okay. So it says that, because we obtained environmental report. So the water there was okay for commercial use, but not for residential. So that was okay because they were going to just build my client was building a metal recycling site on it. So they don't really use for residential purposes. And the other situation, of course, is the gas station. That can happen. There can be leaks. And then the thing the bank will look at is like, did you replace the tank underground, right? Did you clean up? Did you do remediations? And those are like laundromat nowadays. And I mean, they do environmentally friendly detergents, and there's different things. I personally don't have a case, but I think we have come across with my team where they will look at what type of a chemical they use. Yeah.
How about restaurant?
Which one?
Restaurant.
Restaurants? Yeah. We haven't come across those sort of situation that cause contamination.
Deep fried
oil?
Yeah.
No, those I honestly haven't come across the situation. So for my team, like if we're doing anything over 3 million, like if the loan size is over 3 million, we typically require our environmental. So that's mandatory. But if it's under that deal size, we typically don't ask for environmental. But
I have come across properties that's very close to the train rail. And somehow the bank will not loan.
Yeah, like it depends on the bank, depends on the type of situation.
Because they're noisy or because
that I'm not sure.
Oh, okay.
Could be specific to the land use. Could be. And could be future marketability.
And normally the bank need how, like if, for example, we have a appraisal report from last year, will a bank use it?
No.
Okay.
Then we'll talk about that too, because that
sure.
exposure time is very important. Like what's the effective date? Because things can happen along the way. You just never know what's happening. So we like to see So yeah, like these are things, and then also when it comes to appraisal report, the quality can vary. So if you use a good quality appraiser, your report will show you a lot of good information. But we also have seen like very poor quality reports that, you know, the lender just don't like, right? So, you know, you want to make sure that if you get appraisal, I mean, it's anywhere from like 2,000 to 5,000, could be even more, right? When it comes to that appraisal, you probably want to get some good quality analysis in there. So, because it can help you identify all these marketability issues, because down the road, you know, like even for owner occupied or investor, you always think about, can I resell this building, right? Like you may not want to own it forever. You may at one point want to sell it. So you want to make sure it's good condition. It can be sold easily. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, so who can do the appraisal? I mean, we prefer to have, like, this is almost mandatory. So AACI, right? Accredited Appraiser Canadian Institute. So this is you know, anybody who's accredited under that AACI, you know, we recommend them to do the appraisal. And then, you know, they need to be an independent third party and no financial interest, right? So, okay, I'm gonna move on. So here's the appraisal format. This is just the cover sheet. This is the first page you see when you open up appraisal. And then it goes with, you know, these sort of pages. And then it starts with a cover page, and it goes to a letter transmittal, and it outlines all the content. So I won't spend too much time, but think of this as a pyramid. So what happened is when you open appraisal, the first couple pages shows you pretty much all the necessary information you're looking for. So without diving into all the parts behind that, you can get a sense of what this property is. I'll show you a couple pages and you will see what I'm talking about. So it's thinner on top, but it's fattier on the bottom, just because all the information is in the bottom. But I mean, you don't really have to go through the whole thing just because you got so limited time. And with the example I provided today, I kind of took out the important pieces. So down the road, if you see one, you can just jump right into those sections. Okay, transmittal. So this is like the important part. There's a couple area highlighted. So first of all, who did the appraisal? Mike Jordan Associate. This is just example, hypothetical. This is not a real life company, whatever. So it's just imaginary. But you know, but it's important. You can Google this company and see how reputable it is, right? Do you have a question?
Yeah, how much does it cost?
Like from anywhere from 25
Average
to
4,000.
Yeah.
4,000 something, 4 to 5.
4 to 5.
5,000?
Mhm.
Every commercial property need one?
Yeah. For any loan oversized $1 million, we need one.
Okay, with the, under $1 million?
Under $1 million depends. We can get realtor opinions and stuff. And then the team I deal with, we typically do anything over 1.5. So we would require appraisal. We have situations where we request to waive the appraisal, but that's only based off on, let's say, you know, we have done analysis on the building ourselves. Like we do our internal analysis. So if the internal analysis shows, hey, this building is worth this much, and then, you know, we trust the information client presented, and then we look at the loan to value, it's like, let's call it 30-40%, or somewhere like 50%. It'll be like, hey, we're fairly comfortable, and we will ask for exception. But it's not always granted though, right? So we try to save clients money, but it's not always.
So appraisal, how many percentage does it increase the chances of loan approval?
Like it's a mandatory document if you want to apply for a loan that's over $1 million.
So
like you
loan basically depend on the good appraisal.
It depends on multiple factors, not just appraisal. Appraisal supports your, like, so you're going to a bank and say, I want to apply for a loan for this dollar amount. We just need to know, like, hey, why do you think this building is worth $2 million? So you're using this to kind of help yourself gain confidence that, hey, in the market condition like this building is worth X dollar amount,
So,
right? But for the bank, we have our own analysis. We do our own analysis. We look at the appraisal as a reference, and then we use that to support a loan application. But then the client has to have good credit, you know, if they have any sort of a derogatory
Those
credit
are
history, that's
basic
bad.
things, right?
And then cash flow, I mean, the operating business can have terrible cash flow. And then if the guarantor has any sort of issues, that can hinder the application too.
There are lots of factors.
Yeah, exactly. This is not the only one, but it's a, you know,
Important one.
one. So when we work with clients, sometimes clients like, hey, we want to get a conditional approval. So in our approval, we'll say, hey, this is what we're going to approve you for, let's say $2 million to purchase this building. Condition that you have to show us this building is worth, let's say, at least $2.5 million. We'll put that in there, and then you can then do appraisal. And that will probably give you some confidence, right? Because, you know, you're not sure. The appraisal costs you money, so you can do that too. Yeah. Does that help you?
So the bank has their own appraiser or?
No, we don't have a list of appraisers. We
Third
recommend
party?
AACI, so you can go find appraiser. We have a couple names. We'll recommend you a couple names,
Okay,
but then you can compare the pricing.
I got it.
You know what I mean? Some appraiser charge you 5,000, some appraiser charge you 3,000. So you may want to compare the pricing. We'll recommend a couple names to you, and it's up to you who you pick. But then, because you're responsible for the
The
cost.
expensive is always better.
Yeah. So we do give clients options.
Not
No.
necessarily.
Not necessarily, but I mean, you want to find the reputable ones.
I
And then
don't know about the person's quality, but like all about the products, how much you pay, you get the good quality.
Let's continue because lots of contents.
Okay.
yeah, we'll chat more after if you're curious. So here, there's a circle here I put on. So it's important to know who the appraisal was, the report was prepared for. So in this situation, I put in a box. It's prepared for this D&D company. So it wasn't prepared for the bank. Just keep in mind. And then if, you know, when they come to the bank, they actually have to have a transmittal letter prepared, send it to the bank and tell the bank, hey, this is intended for the bank. And that's when we can use that, because typically in the whole appraisal report, it will disclose in the end and say, this information is only used for intended client. Otherwise, it's confidential. Other parties shouldn't be using it. So just keep that in mind. But bank typically will reach out and ask for transmittal letters. And then here it also outlines a couple information. You know, it tell you when was the property was inspected and the effective date, right? So the effective date coincides with the date of inspection. So which is whatever, May 31st. So in some situations, we also have effective date that could be in the future, because let's say this building is being constructed, right? We have the blueprints, the building is being done, we have a cost of budget, right? The building is not there yet, it's construction. So then, you know, that effective date could be in the future.
Like hybrid developer,
Sorry?
hybrid developer, it's commercial park in like private.
Yeah, like, so the clients will typically, yeah, like it will be a hypothetical valuation or futuristic valuation upon the building constructed. Yeah. So that's the transmittal.
So this is for all sale and lease, right?
Say it again?
For sale and lease.
Oh, no, it's only for sale.
Fee simple?
Sale.
For sale.
Only fee simple?
Yeah,
Okay.
only fee simple. Yeah. Okay. So this is the executive summary. Oh, sorry, did I skip one? Okay, no. There we go. So executive summary. With the executive summary, that's the typical session I go to first because it tells me almost everything that I need to know right away about this building. All the legal descriptions, you know, the type of the building, in this situation, the single-story commercial with a basement, right? And then it gives me the site area, tells me how big this place is, the land use classification. So that's an industrial, you know, industrial land, the industrial business zone. And then it talks to me what the improvement is on top of this land, right? So it describes there's the main floor, there's the office space, the shop space, the basement, when it was built, and then how much this building covered, how much this site is covered by this building. So that's also interesting information, because sometimes when you have a large site, and then you only have 14% covered, that means you can add more building on top of it, right? So that could be a good feature for this site as well, because you can potentially add more. If you don't use it, maybe you can lease it out, you can build another structure on it. So that speaks to the character of the building. Now on the other side, I know it's like really small, but it talked about when this building was constructed. It talked about the age of this building. So for this particular example, in the end, what happened is, because this building was like 37 years old, and it probably there are other issues too, it's kind of old. So when they used it, so when they was appraising the building, it didn't use the cost approach, because the building is too old. It's just harder to estimate the cost approach, right? Because you have to estimate the construction cost minus the depreciation, and the depreciation is simply just too large. So it's harder to evaluate with that option.
So 25 years considered too old?
No, this building has like 37 years of age.
Okay.
So it probably like it was, you know, it probably was like 65 years of usage, something along those lines. And then the effective life, remaining economic life, sorry.
Okay.
The remaining economic life was about 25 years. So, and I also have like a lot of clients ask me about amortization. When they deal with a commercial property, they kind of compare that to a residential property and think that you can amortize it over a long time. Because I have a commercial, it's so expensive, you can amortize it maybe for 25, and you know, but that's totally opposite. Like for commercial, because the marketability is not as same as the residential. There are a lot of clients can buy the residential building, but not commercial. And sometimes commercial building is kind of built specific for that tenant in the past. So we use, like in my team, like we have used like remaining economic life minus 10 years as the amortization. So for this one, it's 25-year remaining, so minus 10. So we will have to amortize a loan at 15 years. So your payments will be higher. So you were asking me, hey, is it gonna help the client get the loan? May not. Like the building is really old, and we're gonna ask them to pay us back sooner.
So in older buildings like that, likely the buyer is gonna do renovations.
Yeah.
So how will that improve the remaining life and the amortization?
You have to do appraisal again after all these improvements are made, right? You have to refresh the appraisal. You have to show what you've done has improved the remaining economic life. And you can always come, like for commercial loans, we do an annual review. So you typically comes in and you say, hey, this is the things we've done for our building. I like to refinance it, or whatever things you may have in mind. And then we'll look at the new appraisal report and demonstrate that now the building is longer, better, you know, better, stronger.
Yeah.
And then we'll be like, okay.
So I thought they all normally had a fixed 5 years, 3-year term. How are you gonna suggest them to, like, they bought it this year, did renovation, and next year you suggest them to refinance?
No, like for commercial loans, there's an annual review in process. Yeah, so annually, the client will have to show us the financial statements, and then all their financial reporting to prove that they can actually still qualify for the loan. So not even necessarily that you want to, we're not recommending client to do that, but some of the client, I have a client where they have a business in Canmore. They actually renovated their business. They built a new section out. They spent quite a bit of money for the renovation, and they put in about $500,000. So they've come to us, you know, actually a couple of years now, because the renovation was taking so long. Like you got to get permits. That was taking forever in Canmore. And then they put in the renovation, and it was just slow. So it took a long time. But the goal is that we did a $500,000 loan just to help them with the renovation. So it was a 10-year amortization, very short, right? So their goal is that, hey, once we finish the building, now it's newly renovated, you know, there's some changes and all that stuff. We want to do appraisal again, and you can help me to reassess. And then if we can actually put the leasehold improvement loan together with my old building loan, this will help extend amortization. This help with their cash flow.
Does that mean the the buyer need to do appraisal every year?
Not necessarily, like we ask our client to, like, so every 3 years, we ask the client to refresh every 3 years. But depends on your loan to value. Depends on a lot of situations. Sometimes we waive that request because we do like an internal assessment. If we cannot, then we ask for a refresh. Yeah.
The bank, the appraisal company tells that it has like increased by like 15 to 25.
Well, no, they go into, and these appraisers will go in and assess the building, right? And we'll look at, see, I'm not appraiser, so I can't speak to that. But then they have a break section. They'll say the roof was repaired in this year's, and then the electrical panels done this year, and then they'll be like, oh, they just did a change in this. They will describe in the appraisal report. I'm gonna move on because we were just doing the executive summary, and then here, there's more, like, because if you read the report, it's so comprehensive.
So
there's a lot of good information, right?
Normally I just throw to you to read.
That's why, like, the bank reads a lot of things. Like, we have to read these and just to understand, right? Because there's potential risks you may be overlooking. So I guess we pass that and we go to term of reference. So you were asking me about, is it lease fee interest? Is it, so it's the fee simple estate, right? So here, that's what I outlined. So in the terms of reference, we talk about like scope of the appraisal. And in there, it will read you, like it will say, there's a couple of interesting points. I'll just read this paragraph for you. It says that the basic function in completing the report is to provide an estimated value that can be utilized to aid in obtain a mortgage financing. So that's the purpose of this appraisal, right? To help the client obtain the mortgage financing. And also it says here, the client has requested that we include a hypothetical scenario where the property is fully leased based on the market rent, right? It's an owner-occupied building because I'm like, let's say I'm a steel manufacturer, I operate my manufacturing facility. I just, this is my own building, right? But for the banks, typically want to know, like, if you sell this building, what it can be sold for. In the market space, if this building were to lease, right, based on the market lease. So it says right in there, a hypothetical scenario where property is fully leased based on market rent. And then it also says here, in the section follows, there's a property rights appraised. The appraisal is based off on the fee simple estate. Right, this is the most complete interest in real property, subject to power reserved to the state, taxation, etc. But under this sort of status, you own, right? You have the complete ownership. You can divide, you can lease, you can sell, you can borrow against this piece of assets, and then the commercial mortgages or commercial loans are issued against freehold fee simple estate. So that's what you were asking me about. And then it talked about how was the appraisal developed, right? So it was a in-person physical inspection. And
sorry, second one also lease fees. That's like if it's a national, for example, if it's bank,
yeah,
it's okay too, right?
Yeah, it's okay too because you have a term, lease term is really long. That can't. If the lease term is really short, then we can't do it. Like if we have clients that come to us and then get financing for the improvements, right? So for leasehold improvement, subject to a lease term, right? So if the lease term is like 5 years, we have to get it paid within that time frame. But that's typically what it means. But we can't mortgage the property because you don't own it, right? We can only do the improvements in there. And exposure time. So the exposure time is the reasonable sales period for the subject property to be sold in the market condition with the full, marketing, with the, whatever you do to market that property, it's 4 to 8 months. So that's important to know as well.
Sorry for you mentioned you cannot mortgage the leasehold, but we got the mortgage on CIBC.
We can, like, because the lease is longer. Okay. Yeah,
Oh,
because it's really long.
100 years.
yes,
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, some, like, if we have like, 10-year, that's gonna be
Got it,
difficult. Yeah. So next, I'll move to property description. Yeah, so property description, so this section, like, I didn't take out the narrative because there's just so many pages talking about it. You will see a lot of pictures, maps, diagrams to illustrate what the property looks like, what the surrounding area looks like. A couple good things to know is like its exposure, right? What is it next to? So that's what you were talking about. Like it's next to like a railway track, and that's when the bank doesn't want to do that, right? Because of potential risk imposed to the bank. And then, in that, like, you also want to know, is it next to like a place where it could be environmental issues? I had it done a Baltimore Depot where it's next to like I forgot which gas station, but it was next to a gas station. It was quite close, and then we kind of have to get some reports to figure out, could that potentially pollute my client's property, right? So that's something. So that's why your neighborhood, that map is important to look at. And then that's what we always do too. We always Google map it just to see what's on there, what's next to it. And for land control and zoning, that's also very important too, because it depends on how the property is zoned to use for, it may not meet your client's need. And you kind of need to know that. Like, I have a client recently trying to buy a building. It's a church. It's just been really hard for them to get the right property because, they have to apply for permits to do, to turn this place into a place of worship. And it's just really hard to, they've been looking and looking, it's hard to do. So make sure that you find the zoning that's meet your client's need, right? Otherwise, they're potential buyer, but you presented a property that's wrong zoning, too bad, they won't be able to occupy it. And description of existing site and use, that's what we just talked about. Like, was it a dump site before? If it was a dump site, was there pollution and all that stuff? Does it need to be environmentally cleaned up? So analysis of subject improvements. So that's the traits of this building. We just talked about a little bit, like, when was the roof replaced? Right, that's like the simple thing. Like, was the exterior maintained? Does it look nice, right, from outside? And then when you go inside, what does it look like? It gives you that analysis in the report. It's very important to know because that will impact the property's age, right? So if they maintained well, like the example I show you later, because it's maintained well, it shortens the economic age. So it was like a certain number of years, but now because all these maintenance was in place, your remaining economic life will be longer. And it just provides more comfort to the buyer as well as the lender. Also, it will outline deficiencies and projected repair costs. I ran into that too. I had a client that was interested in buying a retail strip mall. So it was in Calgary, and the tenant was like, it was investment real estate, but we were interested in helping out because one of the buyer was a dentist. He wants to turn part of that building into his dental practice. So we thought that, hey, you know what, we'll support him, and the rest space can be rented out as I think was a convenience store. So that was doable. But then on the appraisal, it listed all the repair that's past due. So when we're looking at those situations, we need to help the buyer understand, even if we're doing a mortgage, like, you still need to kind of maintain the building. These are extra costs, right? So it may cost you 50 extra thousand to maintain it because these are past due, right? The current landlords are going to do it because they just want to sell the asset. So you have to keep them aware. And then of course the recent sales history, and then there's the highest and best use. So highest best use is also, like, I personally haven't really focused hugely on that section, but it typically for the bank, we ask the report to contain those sections of information. Because sometimes that property, in certain situations, maybe the best use of that property is to turn down and put in a different building in here. It could happen, right? So, Okay, so I'm gonna stop here for a bit, and any questions or?
Yeah, for example, if bank approve the mortgage, but interest rate dramatic up, will that change the approval?
If interest rate goes up, that's
Mhm.
what happened the last couple
Yes.
years.
Yeah.
That definitely impacts your cash flow.
Mhm.
Yeah, so like your mortgage could be, so what happened is on the annual review, with some of my clients, we have to increase the mortgage payment. Because let's say you entered into agreement with the bank. The agreement is a legal document. It says that you were going to pay this off in 20 years. But guess what? Interest went up by 3%, 4% in the last couple of years. Now you go back, you look at your amortization, rather than the 20-year, or now you have 1 year past, it's supposed to be 19. Now your amortization is like 25 or 30. So the option will be increase your payment. And then from your payment, you increase your payment, then you look at your analysis, right? Sometimes you may have to pay it down with prepayment, lower the loan, because you need to be able to afford that. Like it's different from residential. Like residential doesn't get reviewed, right?
Right, no.
Residential doesn't get reviewed. So you get a lot of clients actually in a terrible situation because they will have no equity paid down in the 2-year time.
Yeah, owing more money.
Oh yeah.
I mean, the mortgage became higher, yeah.
Yeah, because they're not, yeah, go ahead.
So what happened, say, in the past year, the interest rate went up crazy, the economy is not doing so good. So there must be some business that are in the situation that they need to increase their payment, but they're like, I can't.
Yeah,
It's not doing so well.
Yeah.
What do you do?
That loan,
Yeah, we call the loan.
I saw some builder bankruptcy because
Like
yeah.
The bank will call the
there
loan.
must be some situation you can ask for exception, or every time it's like,
they
I'm
are
going
not
back.
charity.
It goes to special loan. Go to special loan.
But for residential, go into bankruptcy and foreclosure will be take 3 months, no paying. But how about commercial?
Oh my God, I haven't dealt with that. That's like lucky. But I have a client, like there's definitely situations the client wasn't able to afford because we got their financial reporting on a regular basis. We can see that they have big losses. In those situations, they go to special loans. So special loans will sit down with them and figure out the strategy. So typically they have to sell the asset. They will have to sell the building. And it depends on the market condition, depends on all the factors, the type of building. It may not be a bad story. Sometimes that may be the right thing to do. And then, maybe they'll sell at a good price. Yeah, I have actually 2 files now that one just recently sold, that was all done, paid for, we're done. And the other one, it's been listed for 2 years, it's office space, it's hard to see, it's hard to sell. But we won't the thing is we won't force the client because this client have the money to pay for the loan, but really the property is vacant. Nobody's in it. And they don't want to lease it out because they don't want to, because when you become a landlord is other work, right? So what they want to just sell it, but then the market condition simply isn't supported.
Yeah. And also the example you use, the dentist want to own and occupy half, but is there a time limit? Like if he never go in and run the business in how many years, banker will say, okay, we don't.
Yeah, that's a good question. They would need to go in there, like almost like, yeah, need to have a plan and all that stuff. Yeah, but I mean, we didn't end up doing the deal because it was just really tight debt servicing for the family. Because we like to have room, right? Like if all the money you use is going to be paid for the loan, I don't know, like it's just not good for your cash flow. And of course, everybody have different situations. So some of them, it doesn't really matter to them. So here's a property valuation. And it's a fun part. So there are 3 methods. So for each of the method, what I'll do is I'll talk about what it is. And then we'll talk about under that method, how do you calculate the value of the building? And then we'll talk about the pros and cons for each option. Okay, so cost approach. So this one, they really look at the perspective of, if you need to construct a building, right? determine the value of the property by estimating the cost to replace the building, like replace the current building, like minus the depreciation and plus the land use. So here's a hypothetical example. There's this warehouse here. It takes about a 1 acre lot and it's about 10 years old. And then it's, the structure, the improvement is 10,000 square feet. So what will be the price? So how do you determine that is by looking at, hey, for constructing the building, roughly is going to be, let's say, $50 per square feet. It's just an example. And then because it has 10,000 square feet to construct it, it will cost you $500,000. And then it sits on a piece of land that's 1 acre. And then you will look at the surrounding area that's zoned to put these sort of property on, right? It has the same zoning. You can use it for the same purpose and it's vacant. And in this lot, 1 acre size, it's selling, let's say 500,000, $500,000. And then you'll look at this building because the building is already 10 years old. And you kind of calculate there's a depreciation cost of about 100,000. So then now you have a land acquisition cost of $500,000 plus the building reconstruction cost of $500,000. You minus the depreciation cost in that building. Now you come to a valuation of 900,000. So that's how this is determined based on that approach. So when is it used? Like this one typically is used for newly constructed buildings, right? Like when you have a brand new building that's being constructed, it's easy. Like you already have a budget, you know what the land was purchased at, and it's brand new. There's no depreciation cost. But for older buildings, when you have to estimate the depreciation cost, it's hard. Like you don't, right? That becomes maybe not a good option to use. And then the appraiser typically would talk about it in the report. It will say, we would use this approach, this approach, this approach. We didn't use the cost approach because of this reason. And then, so we talked about the advantage. So the advantage is that if you have a very unique building, like a hospital or like a specific school that you build for some like special needs or like, like a specific, very unique building, then that's very helpful to know. And this is a simple approach. And the next one is more complex. It's called income approach. But then this is, that's the problem I have with this link. I don't know why it doesn't show. But anyway. So the property value is calculated based off on net operating income divided by cap rate. And in that formula there for the capped rate, it's just rearranging the formula. So cap rate equals to the net operating income divided by the property value. So this approach is what the bank use the most often is also the most helpful for investors because it tells you how much this building can generate in terms of cash flow. And it tells you if this building pays this amount of cash flow, what's your return, right? So a hypothetical example here, if we just jump right into it, it's like this building, you bought it for $1 million. And then it generates $100,000 net operating income for you. Assuming no debt, you bought it with cash, you're going to generate a rate of return of 10%. So that's pretty sweet. It's a good return. But this assumes there's no debt. Okay, so if you take debt with this, the 100,000 is going to be used to service your debt, right? So that will reduce the return, because technically speaking, right, from the cash you put in. Yeah, question?
Normally, when we calculate capital rate, we don't consider mortgage.
No.
Right. So the debt don't include it.
No.
Okay.
This is all cash return.
Mhm.
Like you put in $1 million bucks, you generate 100,000 a year, you make 10%. But that's no debt. Okay. But I mean, if you look at so I want to dissect each part. I talk about like what is net operating income, what is your capitalization rate. So we spend more time on cap rate because that's like a very interesting topic. But net operating income, this is if you rent it out at market rate, okay, for the type of building, based off on type of tenants you have, based on the lease term, and then based on the type of lease. Like for commercial real estate, typically it's triple net, right? So your operating cost is recovered. So your, a common area maintenance cost, your property tax, your
Utility.
insurance, right? Those is recovered. Yeah.
And
So it's in
yeah.
the lease agreement. I mean, I cannot speak to all the lease agreement, but it's subject to your,
Tenant pay everything.
yeah. Tenant needs to pay the operating cost of this building. But for residential building, that's totally different, right? So you have to consider, that's why it's so we have buildings where we have a mixed use, right? So you have retail on the bottom, you have some office space in the middle, and then you will have residential on top. That's a mixed use. Then each segment will have its own analysis, right? Because your cost is different, your revenue is different, also vacancy rate. So I put it on here. Oh, I forgot. Oh, I put vacancy. So vacancy is on there too. So you need to kind of analyze. For example, recently our vacancy rates for residential is what? 1%,
1.6.
right? Very low, right? Like 1 some percent. But in some of the situations, and the example I put together, they were talking about the vacancy for industrial, warehouse, no, industrial bay. It was like 5%. It could be higher as well, depend on the area. So just keep that in mind. So then when you all calculate these, the appraiser will give you a calculation. So it will be all in the commercial, like in the report here. So you just have to read and understand. But the due diligence I think a buyer needs to do is that if the appraiser says, hey, you know what, for simple, items, let's say tax. I say, well, tax is 14,000. Did you check the property tax assessment? Does it say 14,000? Do you think it's gonna go up? And if you say your insurance is 5,000. Okay, so do you think the insurance is gonna be staying 5,000, or do you want to check? Maybe something happened in that neighborhood. This year is 5,000, next year is gonna be 7, right? So you need to factor those change. And the structural loans, that's one thing. I see, people that buy a building, they're like, oh, I don't factor in any structural loans. But you kind of have to, because what if something breaks down? You kind of build that into it, right? So that gives you net operating income. And from there, interesting thing is that you sometimes you go out and see what the commercial properties are there selling for what price. And, based off on, I have an example, which is not going to show on here. Let me see, because I have sent a.
So this cap rate could be varied from the different type of commercial property, right? Like the multifamily.
Yeah, there's a
retail.
report. Yeah, it's different.
No Wi-Fi.
Normally,
Oh, that's why. No internet.
really?
Connect again. I think that's why it wasn't showing. I was like, why is it not showing?
Commercial report will tell you different kind of business return rate.
Oh, you know what, here.
Hotel business around 10. I don't know if
I actually have a sample. I sent it to Michelle. I'm not sure if she. Oh, I have it here. Oh, is it still not showing?
You can refresh it.
Which button is refresh?
That's off. It's a error. Go ahead. This one, yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, I know. I have a PDF, so this will show. Okay, let's see. Oh, no. Oh.
Roll up.
Okay. I think this is good to see. It's a little blurry, but it kind of shows. So cap rate, right? I have example for cap rate. I'll show you. So we typically just go online and then we look up like Collier International, and that's the one I often look at. And there's also other ones that you just Everson Young, like all these like commercial real estate, they will, those firms, like they will have the report. So they give you a sense of what market has what rate. But for us, we also have a real estate department. So I go to my real estate department for insight as well. Because there's a market, right? When they transact, when you transact, and when somebody's selling the property, they want the cap rate to be as low as possible. The lower the cap rate, you have the same amount of income, you're gonna have a higher price. But if you're a buyer, you want higher return. You feel like owning this property has a little more risk, right? Because you have to manage a tenant, you have to manage the building, you have to make sure it doesn't collapse, and you have to make sure it operates well. You demand a higher cap rate. So there's that conflict. So if envision capitalization rate as a rate of return, right? So we just calculate, we were just talking about, let's say you have a building that generates $980,000 of a net operating income. It's a Class A office space. And then you're like, okay, well, how do I know what cap rate do I use? So the cap rate, so you go out to the market, you get these comparable sales, right? So right here, you have 4 addresses in the same city that were generating similar level of net operating income. So they were generating $1 million to 950. So you want to look at the similar ones. You don't want to go for something like 200,000 net operating income. That would be a totally different size of building. And then look at the price that was sold in the last little while. And then you use net operating income divided by sales price, you get a cap rate. So the first one has a 5.8% return, and you take an average, and then, with some adjustment, you figure out, hey, I'm going to look up for 5.7% return for this building. Okay. And then you use 980,000 divided by 5.7%, right? So that's your calculation for property value. So 980,000 divided by 5.7%, we just calculate based on market comparables, and you arrive something like a $17 million for this building. Yeah.
Where did you find the past sold that? Where do you find the comparable?
Like these will be MLS listings, and there's realtors will have.
Appraisal report will give you the comparison.
The appraisal report.
They will.
In the appraisal, you will get this, but I mean, the appraisers will have to access to the market sales and market. They will have access to all the market sales, what's being sold at what price and all that. They will have those.
They'll call me too. They call the realtor who has a past transaction. They dig out the sold price.
Yeah. Because you guys have a lot of access to all the listings. Like I won't be able to see it, but as a realtor, you will be able to see what sold at what price.
But that's the issue. That's the thing with commercial. It's not typically right?
Yeah. So they have other resources.
Yeah.
Like LoopNet. Yeah.
Yeah. Like a lot of brokerage internal information.
Yes.
They will pay for that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just collect information, but then for us, we verify. So that's what we verify with those, market intels, right? We Google them and look them up. And then we also ask for internal real estate department. The same as like your client would, I don't know, like it's harder for an individual client to do their own research. That's why they rely on appraisal. They pay for this, right?
Yeah, they pay for the data.
Yeah, you have to pay for the information. Yeah. So that's essentially how you can use cap rate. But then, you can imagine this as a rate of return, right? Percentage in return investor receive from the property. It's similar to let's say you invest in a CIBC stock. Well, let's say you own some sort of stock and the stock pays you dividend. That's what you can compare to as well, right? A stock pays you $2 a year, like you look at, or $10, like it depends on what that is, right? So you have a dividend yield of, let's say 5%. That's very similar to the cap rate. You buy a share, you buy a building, the building pays you cash, share pays you dividend. You can compare it that way.
We should compare dividend, or we should compare interest rate.
Cap rate, the way to calculate cap rate is linked to your interest cost too. So I'll explain that later. For you. But I mean, there's just some ways of looking at what the cap rate is. And also there's a interesting way to look at it is the multiple. So there's also like you can think it as a multiple. So when you're generating a 5% cap rate, it's like you're getting a 20 times multiple. So it's expensive, right? So when you buy stocks at cheaper multiples, it's a good deal. When you buy a higher multiple, is a expensive deal, right? So when you generate 10% cap rate, multiple is 10, means that 10 years you get your capital back, right? Or get your money back. So every year make 100,000, you have $1 million property, you make your $1 million back in 10 years. right? So 5%, if you only make 50,000, and to about 20 years, you make your money back. But keep in mind, this doesn't consider your capital appreciation, right? Like if the market appreciates in that, like the property becomes more expensive, that doesn't include that factor. So that's what I'm saying. This is not like to look at the OEM return or what you're getting out of a real estate. It just simply tells you, like, when you first go into it, what's the return you can expect to get? Like if you have $1 million cash, you're gonna buy a GIC that pays you 5%, you have no worry, or you're gonna invest into this commercial property that potentially costs you more, right? It's just a trade-off for investor to compare. So more on cap rate. Okay, so what I'll do. So Vivian was just asking, or like Kathy, right? Yeah, so you were just asking about the cap rate and like how was it like, you know, figured out a calculator, was it comparable to? So typically you can compare this to like a risk-free rate, like the government bond yield. Let's say, you know, let's say you have a 5-year rate that's like 3%, or, you know, right now we have an inverted yield curve. So your short term, for example, this morning I was quoting my client a GIC rate, 1 year fixed, 1 year non-redeemable is 4.15, 2 year 3.6, 3 year 3.55. So we're short term is more expensive, long term perspective is kind of low, right? So, but those are risk-free rates. So imagine we take a 3-year rate that's a 3.6. Now you have a cap rate of 5%. What's your additional risk? Your additional risk is, you know, is your tenant's going to pay your rent, right? Like you own the property, the tenant was good, but then economic hardship happened and the tenant has to move on. Can you find a new tenant? The second thing is, you know, like the age of the property's going to age. Something happened to the property, what do you do? And then also supplier demand. Like now we have seen so much construction in like multifamily, you know, like affordable housing, everybody trying to build, you know, when all the supply comes online, what happens? All right. So that will impact your price. So then the thing is, you know, it doesn't impact you. It may not impact you right away, but as all these supply becomes available, let's say now you have, you know, maybe 5 comparable warehouses in the neighborhood. And all of a sudden, 5 new got built. So your tenant now has more negotiating power. Why do I want to, rent an older building? I want to rent a newer building, but because now there's 10 available, the rent's going to come down a little bit, right? So that will impact you. So that's how this, you know, cap rate actually should include some of these risk factors. But honestly, I think sometimes in the market condition, I don't see that reflected. It is what it is, right? When it comes to investing. Anyway, so that's that component. Any other questions?
Yeah, but some people use cash calculated by, like, for example, you got the mortgage. So the capital rate, you don't need to put the full amount. So cash on, how do you put that?
Oh, like cash on return, like just based off of your equity return,
Yes.
like return on equity or return on
Then
investment.
that would go up to 20-something percent.
Yeah. Yeah, like that you have to, that really goes by the cash flow. So end of the day, you still have a cash flow, right? So let's say you have 100,000 net operating income, and let's say you have to pay, I don't know, 50,000 in terms of mortgage payments.
Yeah.
And then say, let's assume it's at 80%. It's easier to calculate. So you have 200,000 down payment. Now you have 50,000. You make 50,000 on the 200,000 down payment, right?
Yeah.
And that will be a good return, right? But I mean, your
bank won't consider this.
No, that's your equity return. Okay. But the thing is, the bank will only consider what your cash flow is. So you have 100,000 cash flow, but then your mortgage payment is 80,000. Yeah. Then the bank may not lend to you. Like we have to service it less. So let me just do a calculation here. So there's a debt servicing requirement. So for 100,000 net operating income, your maximum debt servicing interest plus principal has to be under 80,000. So we have a debt servicing requirement, right? So
Just curious, because in your department, you only do owner occupied. But any typical appraisal report, you're gonna have the cost approach, the income approach, and
the direct sales, direct comparison approach, like sales
They will
comparison approach.
estimate the market rental value.
yeah, so they kind of, even though it's owner occupied, they
Yeah,
still look
yeah,
at the
yeah.
income approach.
Yeah, we always look at the income approach.
Our building.
Yeah, because what if you want to sell it? Somebody has to be able to buy it. And then, like if it's rented out, because it's always taken as, what we do is we do, we register the mortgage against the building together with assignment and rent and lease.
Oh,
So let's say if you can't, your business go bankrupt, you're gonna lease it out. Somebody
Yeah.
lease it, we will take all the assignment and lease.
Mhm.
So, or if you have a portion building you lease, then you take that as well. In the case of repayment, like you can pay.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's different from investors' perspective, right? So because the investor always have a loan against that, but from the lender is like, hey, is 100,000 able to service debt? The bank doesn't participate in any of the equity gain, right? Because if you sell the building, let's say you bought a building for $1 million, you sell the building in 2 years, you made 500,000 on it, you made $500,000, the bank won't ask you for that. All it cares about is can you service the debt?
Okay.
Yeah, and the last one option is the direct comparison. So what we're trying to compare is there's a warehouse B. So we're trying to get the pricing for warehouse B. So you got warehouse A, got warehouse C. They all have different square footage. They were sold at different prices, and you get per square feet price, which is A was 250 per square feet, C was 200 per square feet, and you take an average. So you take somewhere in the middle. It's more into it than just what I said. Like you have to look at the building
quality.
Quality. You have to do certain adjustment. There's a lot of things to it. So then you come to a price, and then you times the square footage, and it gives you that value. So there is pros and cons, right? Like if for commercials, like sometimes you don't have similar property being sold in that neighborhood, right? So your comparison is very limited. If it's a specialized building, same thing, you're gonna have very limited options that tells you what the price will be. So there's a lot of guessing. So that's why I put this slide on. Let me just make it bigger. Yeah, so comparable properties, these are all strip malls, right? You have to find adequate comparables because this one, look how old it is, right? Like there's one old one new one, their facades are totally different. So those are not good comparables. And also here, there's like an office building down here. One is in a high-rise building, downtown, core, expensive land. And here is maybe a suburb, type B type of office. Like you're gonna have different. So the goal is to find the right property, the right comparable properties for your clients to compare. And then for the result, like the report that we get, we like to see all these property to be similar, right? Like if they're different, then it's hard. And then keep in mind about the cap rate. And you may think, hey, cap rate is like 5%. And now only I'm looking at 6%. No, it's a huge difference. Your price can change by 20%, right? Just from 1% change of cap rate. So, but I mean, I thought I'd just show that to you because it's interesting, right? Like sometimes we don't think it that way, right? Yeah, so I have example. Yeah, no, this is it. But this is that's my thing. And then I have left you guys the example. That was like a real like a real appraisal. How do I make this smaller? Here.
知道去哪里找，厉害。
So this is a real appraisal. Was produced just July 10th, 2024 this year. And here it was, In fee simple estate, is my cursor on there visible? Yes. Fee simple estate, right? Subject property is worth this much. And then it was in response to your authorization, this you is the people here. It's
How
not
much
see.
is commission in commercial?
I have no idea. Like, what is your commission?
3%,
Right?
1.5, 1.5 split.
Is it higher?
If-
Lower, but the
to-
dollar amount for
Yeah.
the sale is higher.
Yeah,
Yeah, do it.
but if it's over 10 million, it will down to 2%, one to each side.
10 million. Oh, I see.
Yeah, yeah.
So so for the price over 10 million, I guess 2%.
Your percentage will go lower.
Oh, I see. And is it the same with all the brokerage in the last?
No, negotiable, everything is negotiable.
Oh,
but-
I-
5%.
I like that mentality.
Kathy specialized.
Well, maybe the clients just find so much value, would be like.
Yes.
Anyways, so this is the table of content, because I thought I'd show you because this outlines exactly, right, what we talked about. They don't really follow the same orders, but they will be like table of content, then you have executive summary, and then you have your term of references, right here, term of references, and then they'll tell you about this market conditions, site, what does it do, like the highest best use of the property, and it give you the comparisons, right? So the calculation, so direct comparison, income approach, cost approach. And in the cost approach, like I said, you have to determine the land value, and then you decide on the cost and depreciation of the building. And then they put together all the analysis to give you thing. And addenda, it gives you all the title, zoning, all the tax assessment, et cetera, so you can make your decision. So here's the executive summary. Like formats are different, but same information, repeats over and over, who's the client for, and sets the intent. The intended use is to aid the client in secure a first position mortgage refinance, right? So industrial warehouse, what the value was, and term of reference, same thing. It repeats again, but then it tells you, hey, this is to provide an opinion of matter value of the property, and it explains on the definition what market value means. And fee simple estate, so what does it mean? So you have the right of possession, right of control, right of exclusion, right of enjoyment, right of disposition, right? So you can transact on it, lease it out, rent it, sell it, separate. Like, so then it talks about the title, the rest. So this is encumbrance. So there's several encumbrance on here, and then some registration. So in some of the situations, you will find properties will say, but this one, it's, you cannot do certain things. It will be on title. So you need to pay attention what it cannot do. This is just right away. They're just like a warning. Hey, ATCO gas has like right away on here. There's gas going through. And then here's a mortgage. So CIBC has a mortgage against this property here. So we already have a charge. But let's say it's not CIBC, it's another bank, right? And then we'll be like, hey, we need to pay them out because we need to be the first position. We have mortgage, or maybe we can be second, depending on situation. And there's a caveat too, like I was telling you, there's assignment of rents on leases. And then the mortgagee is CIBC Imperial Bank of Commerce. So we're doing a refinance. So, but here's the thing though. So for the purpose of analysis, the registered, so for the subject property, so here, sorry, in this last sentence, the subject property has been valued as if free and clear of any financing. Okay, so it's been valued as if there's no any financing on top of it. Okay, and then they talk about ownership. They talk about the transaction. So that's what we were talking about there too. Like, how was it transacted historically, right? Was it transacted, like I hide the party's name because that's private, but then, what is it done? So it talked about here is in 2020, the property only had one building. But then currently we have a new construction completed in 2024. So that tells us what happened to this building, right? They changed it. And the inspection was done on state and the lease in place, right? So the new building so the new building is who is it leased to, and then the original building is leased to so and so. So and it gives you a site map. It tells you what is next to it. There's the fencing, the building, the paved approach, etc., etc. And then here's the soil condition. So soil condition, development and air suggests that the soil structure is adequate to accommodate development without extraordinary measures being required. Right? So that's good news. Okay, so the value estimates contained here assumes no actual or potential contaminative uses have ever been carried out on the property, right? And that the site is free of environmental. So this is an assumption they made, but they also said that, you know, suggested that there's no issues. So that's good to know, right? Then they give you ease of mind, to give a lender ease of mind. And they talk about the building. So here, they talk about actual age, about 8 years, but effective age is 5. And this is to do with, they were doing a lot of maintenance. 63% of building is new. The entire property is well maintained and free from any visible deferred maintenance. So any sort of maintenance, they just, you know, they did it. So economic life, 65 years, that's how long this building can be used for. But because they were so good at maintaining this building, the building can be used for 60 years rather than like 58, right?
Average will be 60 years.
Yeah, so so the building is supposed to be last for 65 years. But then the actual age, they were in that building for like the actual age is about 8. So if to do the math, it should have been 57, right? Or something like that. But then, because of the good maintenance they put on, the building remaining economic life is 60.
Quick question. Before the buyer spend money on appraisal report, is there any way they can find out the soil condition?
From the seller, we just ask.
Yeah, but your seller.
Yeah, I know, it depends. Like you need to ask the seller. The seller typically have done that in the past when they first bought the building. If they have, if they have not, then it's hard to know. But then you just have to ask what the historical is. We have a thing we always go to, like for smaller loans, we go to just ask the client, hey, do you know what this historically was used for? Do you know, right? Like some of them are like, hey, it's a farmland, then no problem.
So you won't register on anywhere like title.
Yeah, and the rest I won't go through. I'm not an expert in knowing the building, but I mean, this is what it is. And then there's like, of course, the market data analysis, highest best use. And then there's just the comparable. So this is for market valuation. So it was trying to figure out what the land cost is. So there's a whole bunch of comparables. And it will talk about how transactions are adjusted. You know, I'm not going to go through the detail. And then here, you know, based off on, this is a direct comparison approach. So based off on the sales, so indicate number 1 to 6 were good sales, right? So the price were from 160 per square feet to 181 per square feet. And then we'll calculate what the median price is, et cetera, et cetera. And then because the subject property is such, and then this is how much I think it's worth. And it give you exposure 3 to 12 months. So they think that if you're selling this building, it could take up to 12 months to sell it. But this is with active marketing and professional, right? Like it depends. Sometimes it can be quicker. And here's income approach. So, you know, we need to look at the rents. All these different buildings that were rented out for this square footage price. And then you take an average rent. So it says based off on the market rent analysis, $15.50 per leaseable square feet, assuming full occupancy. You can rent it out for this much money. And vacancy, like if you have a vacancy here, you have to factor that into your gross rent. And then of course there's the calculation. It just says, hey, you know what, your management allowance is 5%. And your structural allowance is like 3%. So you put in this cost. So you're assuming that you're going to make net operating income about 163,000. And then based off on projected, look at this, as a projected net operating income, you estimate that your income is about 163,000. So that's the calculation you're going to put in your formula. And then here, market-based direct capitalization rate. So here, all the industrial, right, general industrial building that were sold, 21, 22, 22, 20, 22, 23, right? Because apparently there weren't that many sold, right? So very limited data. And what was it sold? Each sold at this cap rate. Look at that, it's a big range.
Yeah, during COVID, industrial became quite popular.
Yeah, so they were getting sold, but the thing is like you don't have any recent data, right? In that neighborhood. Like this is not from Calgary. But I'm just thinking like, look, there's no 2024 comparable, right? The last sale was in February 2023. That's like year and 7 months. It's quite old. And the cap rates are going up. Look, so the price is being depressed, right? I mean, this is a different building. Like when you sell a 3.5 million and 3.7 million versus a 1.5, that's a totally different tenant. But anyway, the range, and then they give you a number. They say, well, this is roughly like, I'm going to use this median number. And then by the way, the median number, the 8.72, it's just the average of these two numbers. Average of 8.46.
Take out the highest and lowest.
Yeah, so and the thing in the middle.
Median.
Yeah. Yeah, and then this way you get this adjusted price. Yeah, so this is all based off on estimate, right? Like there's a lot of numbers that depends on the model, the better the model, the better the price. But this is cost approach, same thing. Land valuation, right? Land valuation, and then cost estimate. So estimates the cost. And then there's the depreciation estimation. And here's a whole section. They talk about square footage here for the section 1, square footage section 2. Yeah, so whatever the type, like the life, like count for life, effective age of the building, right? Effective age of the building. It's very blurry, but you can share the documents and you can see it. So they calculate so here, the replacement cost is right here. So this is a new building. The replacement cost, that's easy because already, they know exactly what the cost will be, and it's brand new. And this is their older building, right? It's hard to know because, how do you go back that many years to know? Because the things that built 10 years ago is going to have totally different costs than now. But anyway, so that's what they estimated it. Okay. And then this is the depreciated cost. So this is after you minus all depreciation. So here's the depreciation cost. So new building, there's no depreciation, 0, right? And old building, the estimated depreciation 104. But I mean, these are all estimates. And overall, they said, hey, if you want to buy a 0.78 acre land, it's going to be this much. The replacement cost of building, we just look at total cost of 1.5 million. There's also site improvement, so that's counted in there too. It's about 100,000. So we think it's about 1.9.
That replacement cost is that's cost for the total together add
Total. So this is
different.
no. So this is because you calculate the replacement cost, which is this number here, the 1.2937. And this is for the old building, which is 496,000. So you plus these two together, you get this number. And then you calculate the depreciated cost. So there's a depreciation amount as well. New building, you have no depreciation, brand new. So for this, you have see this? It says depreciation percentage, 21% depreciation, because it's like you calculate it, right? Like how many years it's been there. You have a formula. This is all based off on their rule, right? Like there's certain rules how you do it.
The insurance company need that too, in case fire.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
So you need the
So that cost is after depreciation. Not exactly the same depreciation cost.
No, this is the estimate, but
No, I mean after below.
yeah. So this is this number here, 392, is 496,000 minus the 104,000 equals 392. And this depreciated cost is 1.175 plus this. There's a Canadian tax removal. So I mean, I'm not an expert. I mean, they will do those adjustments, but it's up to them. Maybe it's GST, I don't know. But 1.565 is the depreciated cost.
So yeah, this cost is replaced cost is the depreciation cost.
Yes. Yeah. So you have the actual cost minus depreciation, and then you plus line. Yeah, so, but I mean, I have the formula there, you can use that as a rule of thumb. Yay, that's it. So give you a free value, and it says, well, this is what we think, 1.85. And then here is an interesting thing.
Normally, I just look at this page when I see the report.
Right, you just look at the value, yeah, yeah, but I mean, there's so much to it, it's actually very interesting.
Yes.
But too bad we don't have time to, you know, some days
Yeah.
with all these information. This is interesting too, because it talks to you about the exposure. Because I mean, how do you know how long this property gets sold? As a realtor, you probably have all those information. So you know, right? Inventory and market days on market, and this is how they did it. So they had this building, so the 1.2, 21 days on the market. That was quick. 21 days was sold. And then this one was sold in 2023.
Normally over 1 year.
For the commercial.
Commercial, yeah.
See, this one was sold, but it was funny, like it was sold in 21 days in 2024. But I was thinking why this appraiser didn't give me a cap rate for this number, for this sale, right? He didn't give me a cap rate for this sale. The comparable he gave me for cap rates were 2022 and 2023. There's no 2024. But look at this. 3 were sold. So this one, 71 days, 21 days, but this one was long. This was 5 million, but you know, I can imagine because not everybody can.
Yeah.
That's a large building. This one was in the market for 365, that's a year, so 12.2 months. And this one down here, December, that was sold for 206, so that's for 7 months. That's not too bad. And this is not like that's not in Calgary, so I don't know about that market, but so average 3 to 12 months. Yeah. So that's it.
Thank you.
No
It's, I told most people it's 1 hour, that's why they have another.
Left.
I think we asked all questions
Yeah.
ready.
Commercial appraisal, does that include residential rebuilding?
No.
Oh,
Residential realtor can do the
oh,
appraisal.
you know, somebody they review the right community, whole community, they review the residential house, so is that belong to the commercial? I mean, developer, they want to review the whole community, so is that belong to the commercial?
No, like that's individual residential houses, right?
Is it?
Can I take this off?
How about,